Welcome everybody to this DIY bathroom renovation. Here's some before shots so you can get an idea of what this space looks like. It's a little bit too crowded, especially with this dividing wall, and it's full of outdated fixtures. I started demolition by removing this paneling that was going halfway up the walls. It's just a little bit too traditional for my liking, and I also removed this closet door going into the linen cabinet. I think demo day is my favorite part of renovating, except for when everything is finished, because you just get to release all of your frustration out on the building. We rented a dumpster during demo days on this income property, and it was super worth it. This dividing wall in the bathroom is blocking out a ton of light from the window hitting the vanity space, which seems to make no sense to me because that's when you would want that natural light, when you're getting ready in the mirror. Removing this was pretty simple. I just took it out one board at a time until it was all taken care of. Always make sure and double check that your wall isn't load bearing before you remove it though, because that would be a problem. There's so much more room. The light can now come in from that window through the wall and fill up the space. I sure had a lot of drywall repairs to do though, and I started with this one here above the vanity. I guess there used to be a medicine cabinet before it got updated at some point. The plan is to come back and do a skim coat once I get all of my patches done. And I'll leave links below to a couple of in-depth drywall tutorial videos that I've made. And next it's time to deal with the drywall where we took down the paneling. This paper is just peeling away. And even though I could probably get away with skim coating over this damaged drywall, I figured the super pro thing to do, or the right thing to do, is to get rid of it and install some new material. Not to mention, I can do that whole big patch in one piece, and then a little bit of extra drywall for behind the toilet area. And always remember to be careful removing any drywall around where you know there's plumbing, because you don't know what could be back there. If you've never cut drywall before, it's a really simple process, and all you need is a really sharp utility knife and a straight edge, which is helpful. It snaps right where you score it with a utility knife, and then you can finish out the cut, and it's ready to go. And if I remember correctly, I'm using 1¼ drywall screws for this 1/2" drywall. As I work on my next sheet, you'll see that I lift the drywall off the ground just a little bit and I shim it while I'm screwing it in. That way it's not touching the floor because you don't want contact. This helps prevent mold and water damage. And finally, it was time to tape and mud these big patches where the paneling used to be. I'm using a pretty wide trowel here because I want that wide reference surface to help blend out and even out any inconsistencies between the old and new drywall. I repeated these steps all the way up to the ceiling patch that we had, and you can see me putting in a little bit of paper on the corner to help reinforce it. I got this powered drywall sander off of Amazon for a great deal. I used it on the entire house, and then I got my 24-inch skim coating blade and I went over every wall in the bathroom that I had done repairs on. I basically wanted to get this as flat as possible, and just like I was talking about earlier with the trowel, if you're using a really wide drywall knife like this, it's going to backfill all of the low spots, referencing the higher points in the wall, and you'll eventually get everything really flat. This process is a little time consuming, but it's not too difficult, and the great part is drywall joint compound sands so easily, so if you accidentally build any up too high, you can sand it back even by hand really fast. I'll be sure to leave a link to this tool as well as all of the materials and supplies that I used for this project down in the description below so you can check them out. The final spot I needed to use that skim coating blade was here in the ceiling where there used to be that built-in soffit above the vanity, but now that it's all flat, we can come back and sand it. And I didn't even break out the power sander, I just sanded things by hand and it was ready for texture. Now I had to do so much work on this wall where the vanity was. I think it's gonna be seamless when we're done. Let's find out. Room's looking good and we're ready to spray texture. I rented this sprayer from Home Depot, but it's what you could expect from Home Depot or Lowe's or most places. It's about 60 bucks for 4 hours and around 100 bucks for a day. Running this machine is really simple and it comes with directions if you rent one or buy one, I guess. But basically you just thin down joint compound, the same stuff we were using on the repairs, and then the machine has different nozzles for different texture patterns and thicknesses. I went with a basic orange peel pattern and you can see me spraying it here. The goal is to make random patterns, that way you don't see yourself creating vertical or horizontal lines. You want to make sure and break that up if you do. In fact, there's a few videos that I've got in-depth tutorials on, and you'll see the cards pop up in the corner of the screen if I've got one. And our next step is paint and primer. The drywall texture that I just put on is gonna be super porous and absorb a lot of that first coat. So instead of doing a more expensive first coat with my paint, I used Kills 2 Interior-Exterior Primer to get going. The color I'm using is called Whipped Cream. It's just a slightly soft off-white. I'm gonna try and set y'all in the shower. When using an airless sprayer, you want to be about 12 or 18 inches off of the wall or ceiling that you're spraying and be as parallel as possible. Now I've got to try and get the hose out without hitting the walls. Super Pro! And here we are looking way better. Time to update the floors. One of the coolest things about luxury vinyl plank flooring is that it's waterproof and you can install it directly over tile in a bathroom. I'll be putting my floors down on top of these 12-inch ceramic tiles. The tiles aren't perfectly flat and we need to fill the grout lines, and we'll do this with Henry Feather Finish. This product is made for subfloor prep and to get everything flattened before you put new floors down. It bonds to just about everything and you want to mix it to the consistency of a thick pancake batter. This isn't a complicated process, and what I would say is just watch out for building up too much material. You want to reference whatever the high point in your tile is, and then use a trowel, a wide putty knife, or drywall knife to smooth out that concrete. In this clip, you can see how it built up in different sections because all of the tiles weren't perfectly flat on the same plane. So to even that out, I came back with a random orbit sander and I sanded it with 100 grit paper. So I had a slight change of plans. I was originally gonna keep this vanity but just update the countertop, but that's not what we're gonna do anymore. I'm gonna tear out and replace this entire vanity with something new that's cool, trendy, and lets everybody know that this is a brand new space. I was looking online, I found a good deal on a vanity that I think is gonna be a lot of bang for my buck, but I will have to go back and blend my drywall texture behind the vanity. The majority of this drywall will be covered by the vanity, but it's not gonna have that little 1x4 backsplash on the back side of it, and it is about an inch less deep. So because that cabinet's a little bit more shallow, I just decided to patch and then blend out the texture in this whole area. After my first application of joint compound, I came back and sanded it with 100 grit sandpaper, then I did a second coat to smooth this out even more. Remember, the wider knife you use, the wider your reference surface is, so that's gonna give you a flatter plane and make it to where you're gonna do less sanding overall. And on the left, you can see that I got some joint compound in the existing texture, so I'm gonna use a wet towel to remove that and bring out some of that negative space so the blend is a little easier. And I'll use a can of orange peel spray texture to blend all of this out before paint. This product is a little tricky to use. I've done it a few times. Make sure it's shaken up really well, and then have it about 12 or 18 inches off of the wall and stick to really random patterns. While this paint was drying, I went to the shop and I cut a piece of 1/4-inch cement backer board that happened to be pretty much the perfect thickness to fill the negative space in the flooring. After nailing it down to the subfloor, I mixed up a little bit more Henry Feather Finish and I floated some concrete to make this all really level. And this is where I would say don't be intimidated by this process. It's pretty easy to use your eye and get it flat and then come back and fix any imperfections with sandpaper. And now it's time for floors. I'm using this gray wash luxury vinyl plank flooring. It's a part of the Modin line sold by Floretti. This is what I'm using everywhere throughout the house. If you want to check them out, I'll leave their website down below. Also a code for 50% off, a sample pack so you can see the material and the color in your space. Our first piece is already cut. We're gonna get it in here with an 1/8-inch spacer on the end. After that, I'll take my next piece and I'm gonna reverse the orientation compared to how I'll install it. And then I'll make a mark and then score the plank with a sharp razor blade. And now it should just snap right there. Perfect. Next, I'll line my planks up so there's no gap in the veneer and mark for where I need to cut out around the wall. I found that a jigsaw is easiest for this task. Just make sure you're using a high tooth count blade to avoid any tear out. Now we'll test to see how it fits. I'll get these two linked end to end and then in the doorway. That's gonna work perfect. Awesome. I'll give it a quick knock with a pull bar and then throw spacers back here. And remember, before we mark to cut the next piece, we'll reverse the orientation, line up an 1/8-inch gap here with the veneer, then we can score it with our utility knife and just snap it to length. In a confined space like this, I found it easier just to connect the planks end to end and then along the longer edge. But all in all, this is a really simple, really square room, so it wasn't anything too complicated or anything that I had to think too hard about. I just needed to make sure that my patterns weren't repeating and that I just liked the way all of the veneers paired. Looking good. This next section I'm really excited to share because I had an outdated almond colored shower and tub surround that happened to be in great condition. It just didn't look that awesome. So I'm using this Dwyll tub and tile paint that's a little 2-part concoction that you need to mix together before you apply. And as long as you keep this covered when you're not using it, it'll last all day. This goes on with a foam roller, and it took me about 3 or 4 coats to get perfect coverage. In part, I think that's because my tub and shower had quite a bit of contours. You can see that it's just not flat panels. And because of this, I didn't apply as thick of coats. I also had quite a bit of brush marks that I had to do multiple coats on before they were finally completely covered. I did this over the course of 2 days while I was working on other things while the paint dried, and I'm so happy with how the results came out. This totally looks like a new tub and shower, and now that I've added new fixtures, it especially looks that way. And the cool part is we only spent about $50 on the paint kit instead of like $500 on a new surround. So now it's time to install the door. I'm going with a basic 2-panel design throughout the house, nothing too traditional or modern. And my first step for this installation was to backfill some of the space in this oversized frame. The floor was also off level by about 1/8 of an inch, so you can see me trimming that with my speed square and the jigsaw before putting it in place. I checked the first side of this opening for level before I used my nailer to attach this side of the door jamb to the framing. Then, I used shims to make sure the reveal on the left side of the door was consistent from the top to the bottom, and then I nailed this side in place as well. And I'm happy to report it came out looking perfect. And so that means it's ready for trim. This is just basic square MDF door casing that I picked up from Home Depot, and it's primed white, ready to go. If you're a beginner, I always recommend making your first trim cut a little bit longer than what you think in case you need to trim it back. And our next step is going to be installing a new vanity mirror with a built-in light. But first, I'd like to give a big thanks to the sponsor of today's episode, Squarespace. If you need a website, online store, or just a custom domain, Squarespace is your one-stop shop, and the best part is you need a 0 website building experience. And now, with Fluid Engine, that has never been more true. Just start with one of Squarespace's best-in-class designer templates that look great right out of the box, and then you can literally customize every feature. And with the enhanced drag-and-drop technology on both desktop and mobile, it's never been easier to unlock your unbreakable creativity. Plus, there are no limits to the number of products that you can sell using a Squarespace store, whether that's a physical good, a digital good, or a service product. And if you're somebody that takes payments in person, Squarespace has got you covered. By connecting a Square card reader to the Squarespace app, all of your sales, orders, and inventory are up to date online and in person. So to learn more, make sure and follow my link in the description, squarespace.com/modernbuilds, where you can build out your entire Squarespace site before entering any of your credit card info. And then when it's time to make your site live, don't forget to use my code, ModernBuilds, for 10% off your first site, store, or domain through Squarespace. As always, big thanks to Squarespace for the support and you all for watching. Now let's finish out this renovation. Now we're back, and it's time to install our integrated LED vanity mirror. Now this thing is super fresh and modern. You see these all the time in contemporary hotels and Airbnbs. It worked! My vanity won't show up for another day or two, so I'm just gonna mark the height that it's gonna be and the width so we can get the mirror centered. A while back, I actually built a mirror like this from scratch, and I'll leave that link down below if you want to check it out. It's from like 5 or 6 years ago, I think. On this mirror, I knew I wanted to cover the outlet box on the wall. That's sort of the reason I bought the size that I did, and it's the reason I hung it at the height that I did as well. After finding the stud locations, I then installed these cleats so that one screw at least went into a 2x4 on each of these. On the other side, I used the included drywall anchor, that way it was gripping onto something. These mirrors come with a plug attached in case you just want to hang it on a wall and plug it into an outlet, but I'm going to hardwire mine in. And you can see how this wire right here has these ridges on the side. That means it's indicated as neutral. So this one here will be our hot. I stripped these wires back so that it was prepped, and then I had my buddy Andy give me a hand while I was installing this. He's a certified electrician, so it makes me a lot more comfortable doing electrical projects with him around. The toughest part of this project, honestly, was fitting all of the wires back into that small, old electrical box, but we made it work. And now that it was on the wall, you already know it was time to try it out. Super Pro! Let's go. Andy, thank you for the help. Yeah, we've got 3 different color temperatures. Then it can dim. And there's a heating element on the back that basically defogs the mirror. It seems silly to update to such a modern mirror without changing out the plug to something a little bit more contemporary. A square outlet design is always a little bit fresher, but I made sure to get the kind that have these USBs built in, one with the traditional USB and then the other one with the smaller USB-C. That way anyone can plug or charge devices without having to find some kind of charging brick. This piece here that I'm attaching to the ceiling is the mount for a new bathroom light. It's one of those flush mount LEDs, and the cool part is it's got a little ring around the top that's basically like a night light. It's really simple, and that's pretty much what I wanted, but it does put out a lot of light. We're now jumping from working on the ceiling back to working down on the floor. I need to cut some baseboard trim to go around all of the transitions between the wall and the floor. The profile of this is the same as the doorway, but the boards are just a little bit wider, meaning the trim's just a tiny bit taller. I pre-painted all of these pieces with a couple coats of white paint before I nailed it to the walls. This way I don't accidentally get a bunch of paint on my floors painting these baseboards. I'm using 2-inch long 18 gauge brad nails to attach this, and I made sure to sink the nails into the 2x4 studs behind the drywall. Then I filled the nail holes with some white color changing wood filler, and I used this latex caulk around all of the transitions between the drywall and the trim, just to make sure there's no gaps. And if you spray the caulk after you apply it with a little bit of dish soap and water, it's really easy to shape it and mold it with your finger without it sticking to your hands. All of the steps I did on the baseboard, I did around the doorway just to make sure I had a really clean look. And once this had time to dry, I came back and sanded the face of my trim smooth. Of course, now I need to go back with paint around all of my trim to cover up this filler and the caulk, but the cool part is now I don't have to worry about covering the whole face of the baseboard. I just have to get the top and everywhere that I had filler, and I don't have to worry about masking things off as much. The tub is the only place I didn't apply latex because I'm using this silicone caulk that's basically made for transitions like this between the tub, trim, and floor. Latex is made to be paintable, but it's not quite as durable as this silicone, which is non-paintable. It's toilet time. I went with a slightly more modern design than what you see a lot of times. At least something a little more unique than what I saw in-store at Home Depot. I picked this up for about $200 on Wayfair. Yeah, that's cool. It's got a really slim tank, and then you don't see any of the visible piping like you do a lot of times on the side. I found out quickly why most manufacturers have that area visible, because aligning and then tightening down the nuts and bolts is way easier on a traditional toilet than this one, but it isn't too tough, and it is a really cool look. This also has a dual flush mode. That way when you're just peeing, you hit the number 1 and it saves water, but it's still got power for number 2. Oh, and a soft close lid. Very nice. All right, you gotta test it out. Tell me what you think. Pretty nice. Oh, he likes it. Super Pro.
Super Pro.
Super Pro dumps. Above the toilet, I'm gonna install this little rack that also has a rod where you can hang a couple of towels. It's not anything crazy, but it will add some functionality, and I put it together in just a couple minutes. First, I found level, and then I drilled where I wanted it to be, centered above the toilet. Then, I used the included drywall anchors and screws to hang everything. Really simple. And this is probably a good time for me to mention that I'll leave links down in the description to all the tools, materials, and supplies that you've seen throughout the video, including this really cool metal rack for hanging towels and stuff next to the shower. It's got a pretty wide capacity, which is awesome for filling up this blank wall. And I couldn't get both brackets into studs, but I made sure that the one closest to the shower was, because I figured that's where people would be pulling most. I went with a shower curtain that doesn't need any hooks. I really like the way that it kind of pleats itself, and it's got a cool texture. And I really like how it lets light through. And yes, it is monochromatic, but I like that herringbone texture. Just gives it a cool modern look. And now the final delivery, it's here, the bathroom vanity. I love it. Look at that, it's so cool. For the price I paid, something like $700, I'm real happy with the quality of this vanity. Even though it is a veneer finish, it's good build quality. And for that price, it includes a double sink integrated countertop.
awesome.
And I think that's gonna be a huge upgrade when it comes to convenience. And to match, I got a couple of really contemporary faucets in the same kind of nickel finish that I used in the shower. This thing is so narrow, I can't wait to see it in real life. That is gonna have to wait though, but check out all that storage. And you've gotta have a little hand towel loop. I went with a modern one. Installing this is so similar to everything else. It's got a little bracket that you screw on. I used drywall anchors, and then you connect everything and tighten it with the Allen key. I'm starting to get excited here because we're getting to the very bottom of the to-do list here. Once pretty much everything in the whole house is complete, I'm gonna paint all of the doors with a sprayer at the same time, but for now, I went ahead and put this one in, even though it's just primed, and I threw in a temporary doorknob. I'll probably buy a big 10 pack of really modern ones, so if you have a suggestion, let me know. All right, last minute change of game plan. I'm gonna paint this little wall shelf. I like the way it looks, it's got a cool shape, but I've got a lot of white around the room, especially with the walls and stuff. So we're gonna break that up just a tiny bit with a similar color to what I'm gonna be painting the doors eventually in the whole house. And look at how cool this shower mat is. It's gonna bring a good pop of wood tone to help match with the vanity. I should probably put the same size gray mat underneath this. And with that, our DIY bathroom renovation is complete. But before we check out the results, let's go back and see what it looked like. This bathroom is decent sized, but it felt cramped because it had a ton of different finishes, colors, and literally a dividing wall. But I am very excited to share with you the afters. What can I say? Everything is just bright, modern, and just new. Whoever's in this place next, whether it's an owner or a renter, I'm sure is gonna appreciate the changes that we've made. And I learned a lot in this process. It seems like I always do on these room renovations. And I'm curious what you guys think in the description down below. Of course, it's a lot of white, but aside from that, what do you guys think? I took this renovation or makeover a lot further than I planned originally, as this entire house has taken longer, just because I keep going further in depth. And now it's time for the price breakdown. In total, we spent just about $2 grand. And I think we got a lot of bang for our buck. Y'all know I'm not a real estate agent, but if I had to take a guess, I would say we got a 10 grand increase in the equity of this property. I mean, who knows, maybe more. I'm curious though, let me know down in the comments what you think we've got in equity on the house. As always, I appreciate y'all watching a ton. Make sure and like, comment, and subscribe down below. And don't forget to hit that notification bell. That way YouTube lets you know when I post my next video. So everybody have a great week, and we'll see you next time on Mike's First Flip.
It's Mike's First Flip.
Bye y'all, see you next time.